I gripped my portfolio tighter, feeling the leather dig into my palms as Gwen blocked my path to the Murray conference room. The morning light streamed through the glass walls, illuminating the empty chairs and pristine table where I'd planned to prepare my presentation. "I'm sorry, but do we have a problem?" I asked, showing her my digital reservation confirmation. "I booked this room 3 days ago." Gwen's lips curled into that familiar smirk I'd observed for 3 weeks now. Her pearl necklace caught the light as she straightened her spine, using her extra 2 inches of height to maximum advantage. "This space," she said, tapping her manicured nail against the door, "is reserved for senior staff only, not for." Her gaze swept over my simple gray blazer and practical flats, lingering on the institute lanyard that identified me only as Sarah, Research Division. "Not for people like you." Heat crept up my neck as I noticed Dr. Pierce and Dr. Harlow pretending to study their tablets nearby, deliberately avoiding eye contact. They'd seen this before. Everyone had. But the online system showed availability. I insisted quietly, aware of how my voice echoed in the corridor. There was no indication of rank restrictions. Gwen sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. 20 years I've maintained standards at this institute. 20 years of excellence because we understand hierarchy. She gestured toward the elevator. "Try the basement room. That's where new researchers belong until they've proven themselves." The basement room. No windows, spotty Wi-Fi, and chairs that squeaked with every movement, where important work went to die. I could feel eyes on my back as I turned away, my carefully prepared materials now useless. The whispers would start as soon as I was out of earshot, another newcomer put in their place. "And Sarah?" Gwen called after me. "Next time, check with my office before making reservations. It'll save everyone time." I nodded without turning around, walking steadily toward my office at the end of the corridor. Only when I closed my door did I allow my neutral expression to slip, revealing a calm smile as I glanced at my nameplate sitting face down on my desk, the one that would be installed tomorrow. The one that read, Dr. Sarah Lin, Director of Research and Scientific Innovation. I'd spent the last decade revolutionizing methodologies that transformed 3 failing research institutions into world-class facilities. The board had recruited me with one mission: salvage their plummeting reputation and dismantle the toxic hierarchy that was driving away top talent. Their only request? Observe from the shadows for 3 weeks before the official announcement. Now I understood why. Hey, if you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories just like this one. Leave a comment telling me what you'd do in Sarah's situation. Would you reveal your identity immediately, or wait for the perfect moment? I'd love to know your thoughts before we continue. My name is Sarah Lin, and I've built my career on patience. While my colleagues chased spotlight moments and rushed publications, I refined methodologies that stood the test of time. At 37, I'd become known as the architect in research circles, the problem solver institutions called when systems were broken beyond conventional repair. The Westlake Scientific Institute had once been a pioneer in biomedical research. Now it was hemorrhaging talent and innovation, its reputation sustained only by achievements from a decade ago. When the board chairman called me, desperation had colored his voice. "Our younger researchers are leaving in droves," he'd explained. "Grant applications have dropped 60%. We need someone who can see what we can't." I'd accepted on one condition: 3 weeks of anonymity to observe the institute's true dynamics without the artificial behavior that inevitably accompanies a new leadership announcement. What I discovered was more troubling than statistics suggested. Innovation wasn't just stagnating, it was actively suppressed. Resources flowed to a select circle of senior researchers, regardless of merit. Promising projects died in basement rooms while mediocre work with the right names attached received prime facilities and funding. And at the center of this system stood Gwendolyn Foster, administrative head of operations. Not technically a researcher herself, Gwen had accumulated extraordinary power through her control of schedules, space allocations, and resource distribution. She decided whose grant applications received administrative support, which projects got showcased to visitors, and who received invitations to career-making conferences. For 20 years, she'd cultivated an inner circle bound by loyalty rather than excellence. Critical voices were systematically isolated. Talented researchers who questioned the status quo found themselves without lab space, stuck with broken equipment, or saddled with excessive administrative duties until they inevitably left. I'd watched it all from my deliberately modest office, taking notes in meetings where junior researchers' voices were ignored or interrupted. I'd seen brilliant ideas dismissed without consideration, while mediocre proposals from Gwen's favorites sailed through approval. Now, returning from my humiliating encounter, I settled behind my desk and reviewed my notes one final time. Tomorrow's executive meeting would be more significant than anyone anticipated. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts exactly 22 minutes after our hallway encounter. "Come in," I called, sliding my tablet into a drawer. Gwen entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. Her practiced smile faltered as she noticed my sparse office, deliberately chosen as the smallest in the research wing. "I wanted to personally welcome you," she began. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced since you arrived. I'm Gwendolyn Foster, head of administrative operations." Then her eyes fell on my nameplate, still face down on my desk, partially visible from her angle. "What's this?" she asked, taking an uninvited step forward. I turned the nameplate upright with deliberate slowness. The blood drained from her face so rapidly I wondered if she might faint. "Director of, you're the new. The board's announcement goes out tomorrow morning," I said calmly. I requested time to observe normal operations before assuming my official role. She sank into the chair across from me, pearl necklace trembling slightly against her collarbone. "The conference room," she whispered. "I didn't realize." "That was the point," I replied. 3 weeks of seeing this institute as it truly functions, rather than how it performs when leadership is watching. Her breathing quickened, carefully crafted confidence crumbling. "I can explain about earlier. We have protocols for resource allocation that ensure—" "I'm intimately familiar with your protocols, Miss Foster," I interrupted. "That's precisely why I'm here." Her mind was visibly racing, calculating damage control strategies. I could almost see her rewriting history, constructing alternate narratives where her actions served some greater institutional good. "Dr. Lin?" she began, voice steadying as she regained composure. "In my 20 years here, I've developed systems that maintain our standards. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about resource prioritization." "Interesting approach to prioritization," I noted. "I've been particularly studying your basement conference room. Did you know it has black mold in 2 corners? Yet, it's where our immunocompromised research subjects support group was scheduled to meet last week." Her smile tightened. "Maintenance issues happen in any facility. I'll have that addressed immediately, along with the pattern of which researchers consistently receive substandard facilities." She leaned forward, voice dropping confidentially. "Between us, scientific excellence requires difficult choices. Some researchers simply haven't proven their value yet, like Dr. Isabel Kamari, whose cancer screening protocol was just adopted by 17 major hospitals. She left after being relegated to the basement for 8 months despite her breakthrough results." Gwen's jaw tightened momentarily before she forced another smile. "Individual cases don't reflect overall patterns. I'd be happy to walk you through our allocation methodologies tomorrow. With your fresh perspective and my institutional knowledge, we could make an exceptional team." The practice charm was returning, her recovery almost impressive. She'd survived 3 directors before me, I remembered, each time adapting, aligning, and ultimately shaping institutional culture back to her preferred hierarchy. "I look forward to tomorrow's executive meeting," I said, offering nothing more. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Shall I have maintenance move your things to the director's office this afternoon?" "No need. I'll work from here until after tomorrow's meeting." Confusion flickered across her face, but she nodded graciously. "As you wish. And please, feel free to use the Murray room whenever you'd like. I'll personally ensure it's always available to you." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "The online booking system works perfectly when everyone follows the same rules." She paused at the door, calculating one final approach. "Dr. Lin, I hope we can move past this unfortunate misunderstanding. In my defense, the board kept your identity completely confidential." "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "They did exactly as I asked." As the door closed behind her, I returned to my preparations. By tomorrow evening, Gwen would understand exactly why I'd spent 3 weeks watching, rather than directing, and why the board had been so eager to bring me here. But first, I had a basement conference room to visit. The basement conference room's flickering lights cast sickly shadows across peeling wallpaper. A musty odor hung heavy, emanating from dark patches in the corners. The mold I'd mentioned to Gwen. The ancient projector hummed loudly, its fans struggling against accumulated dust. Yet this dismal space buzzed with energy as 6 researchers huddled around a table meant for 20. Their voices quieted when I entered. Don't mind me, I said, taking a seat in the back corner. Please continue. They exchanged uncertain glances before a young woman with bright eyes and a determined expression stood up. As I was saying, our detection method shows 93% accuracy in early-stage identification, compared to current standards of 78%. She clicked to the next slide, which refused to advance. She tapped the remote repeatedly before sighing. Technology down here is temperamental. Here, let me, said an older researcher, fiddling with cables. Quinn's work deserves to be seen properly. It could revolutionize early detection if given proper support. I watched Quinn's presentation unfold, marveling at its elegance. Her methodology was brilliant, a simple adaptation that could save thousands of lives while reducing costs. Yet here she was, practicing in a moldy basement while upstairs conference rooms sat empty. Have you presented this to the department heads? I asked when she finished. Quinn's shoulders tensed. 3 times. Each time I was told it needs more development before receiving consideration for institute resources. While Dr. Peterson got full funding for his derivative imaging study, muttered another researcher. Dr. Peterson is on the prioritization committee, Quinn explained, and he's worked closely with Miss Foster for 15 years. I see, I said, making a note. And how many of you regularly use this space? They all raised their hands. We call ourselves the Basement Brigade, said a lanky researcher with kind eyes. Anyone doing work that challenges established methodologies eventually ends up down here. Yet you stay, I observed. Quinn straightened. The science matters more than the surroundings. Even if we're invisible here, the work isn't. I left with their research summaries and a growing sense of purpose. By evening, I'd reviewed 17 projects relegated to the basement, each innovative, each systematically sidelined. The message on my tablet arrived at 9:42 p.m. Dr. Lin, I've prepared a comprehensive briefing on institute protocols to help you navigate your first weeks. 20 years of institutional knowledge at your service. Breakfast meeting tomorrow, Gwendolyn Foster. Classic damage control. Already positioning herself as the indispensable guide, the keeper of institutional wisdom. I declined politely, citing preparation for tomorrow's executive meeting. Morning arrived with a flurry of congratulatory messages as the board's announcement went public. My office phone rang continuously until I silenced it. The nameplate on my door had been installed overnight, professionally mounted, unlike the temporary ones given to other new researchers. The executive meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the largest conference room. When I arrived 15 minutes early, Gwen was already there, arranging water bottles at each seat. Dr. Lin, I've prepared materials for your introduction. She handed me a folder containing talking points that painted the institute in glowing terms. I've highlighted key achievements you might reference. Thank you, but I've prepared my own presentation. Her smile didn't waver. Of course, but as someone new to our culture, you might find these institutional insights valuable. I'm happy to guide you through potential sensitivities. I appreciate the offer, I said, connecting my tablet to the display system. But I believe I've developed a reasonably accurate understanding during my observation period. Department heads and senior researchers filed in, curiosity evident in their expressions. Some I recognized as Gwen's inner circle, their reserved seats always in the premium conference rooms, their projects consistently prioritized regardless of merit. Others entered with more hesitation, those whose brilliance had been systematically diminished. They took seats along the walls rather than at the main table, a habit formed through years of implicit hierarchy. Please, I gestured to Quinn and her colleagues who hovered near the door, join us at the table. Every perspective is essential today. Gwen's smile tightened as she watched her carefully maintained order being rearranged. Dr. Lin, we typically follow a seating protocol for efficiency in these meetings. Not today, I replied simply. When everyone was settled, I began without preamble. For 3 weeks, I've observed this institute not as its director, but as an ordinary researcher. What I've seen has been both troubling and illuminating. The room tensed. On a large screen behind me, data began to appear, not accusations or anecdotes, but irrefutable patterns showing resource allocation, project approval rates, and publication trajectories correlated with proximity to administrative favor, rather than scientific merit. Over the past 5 years, the Institute has lost 38 researchers, I continued, 31 of whom have gone on to make significant contributions elsewhere. Meanwhile, our own innovation metrics have declined by 62%, Dr. Peterson scoffed. With respect, Dr. Lin, Complex institutions require structure. Not every researcher can access premium resources simultaneously. True, I acknowledged, which is why allocation should correlate with scientific promise rather than personal connections. I clicked to the next slide. A simple correlation between resource allocation and proximity to Gwen's influence network. The data told its own damning story. This isn't about individual blame, I clarified, noting Gwen's increasingly rigid posture. Systems evolve over time, often with unintended consequences. Our task now is correction, not accusation. For 90 minutes, I outlined comprehensive changes, transparent resource allocation, blind review processes for internal funding, rotation of conference room scheduling, and an anonymous reporting system for bias or favoritism. Throughout, Gwen maintained perfect composure, nodding at appropriate moments while making careful notes. Only the whitening of her knuckles betrayed her distress. Finally, I said, effective immediately, we're implementing structural changes to administration. The room stilled. Here came the moment many expected, Gwen's demotion or dismissal. She herself sat straighter, chin lifting slightly, as if preparing for a blow. Our administrative head will now lead a newly created transparency initiative, I announced. Ms. Foster's 20 years of experience makes her uniquely qualified to implement these reforms. Confusion rippled through the room. Gwen's expression shifted from resigned dignity to uncertainty. I don't understand, she said carefully. You'll oversee implementation of all new protocols, I explained. Your responsibilities will include monthly public reporting on resource allocation patterns, scheduling equity, and diversity of funded research streams. Understanding dawned in her eyes. She wasn't being removed, she was being repurposed. Every policy she would now enforce contradicted her previous actions. Every report she would file would document the very problems she had created. Additionally, you'll chair a new equity committee comprised of researchers from all levels, including those currently using basement facilities. You want me to dismantle my own systems, she stated flatly. I want you to transform them, I corrected. Your intimate knowledge of current processes makes you ideal for guiding their evolution. As the meeting concluded, department heads filed out with thoughtful expressions. Some looked relieved, others unsettled. Quinn and her colleagues departed with cautious hope, stealing glances back as if fearing this change might evaporate in their absence. Gwen remained seated, her perfect composure finally cracking. Why not simply fire me? She asked when we were alone. This position you've created is precisely aligned with your stated values, I finished. You've repeatedly emphasized your dedication to maintaining standards and excellence. Now you'll uphold different standards, ones based on merit rather than connection. You're using me as an example, she said, voice hardening. Public humiliation disguised as opportunity. No, Gwen, I'm offering genuine transformation. Your institutional knowledge is valuable, but its application needs correction. She gathered her materials, dignity reassembling like armor. I've survived 3 directors before you, Dr. Lin. I'm aware. Each time returning to familiar patterns once initial scrutiny faded. I met her gaze directly. That won't happen this time. We'll see, she replied, voice steady despite her trembling hands. This institute has deeper traditions than you understand. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But tomorrow morning, I'll be visiting the basement conference room again. I suggest you join me. She paused at the door. Why would I do that? Because Quinn is presenting her detection methodology to the National Health Advisory Board via video conference. From that room, that's impossible. The technology has been upgraded as of this morning, I finished, along with new chairs, proper lighting, and mold remediation. After all, we can't have international partners questioning our standards. Her expression hardened, calculation replacing shock. You've made your point, Dr. Lin. No, I said quietly. Not yet, but I will. As the door closed behind her, I gathered my materials, knowing this was merely the opening move in what would be a carefully orchestrated transformation. Gwen believed she could outlast me as she had others before. She didn't yet realize that, unlike my predecessors, I hadn't come to manage the institute. I had come to remake it. And sometimes, true remaking requires dismantling from within. 2 weeks passed in carefully orchestrated transition. Each morning, the Transparency Committee, headed reluctantly by Gwen, met to review resource allocations. Each afternoon, implementation reports crossed my desk, detailing which changes had been executed and which faced logistical challenges. Those challenges multiplied suspiciously. Regrettably, the basement renovations will require additional time, Gwen informed the committee, her voice professionally apologetic. Structural concerns have emerged during initial assessments. Interesting, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. Because our independent contractor completed a full inspection yesterday. His report indicates all renovations can proceed immediately. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I'll revisit this with our facilities team. After she left, Quinn lingered behind. She'll find another way to delay. She always does. I'm counting on it, I said. The pattern continued through our third week. Every roadblock Gwen erected was met with quiet, irrefutable counteraction. When premium lab equipment mysteriously became unavailable for basement researchers, I produced documentation showing its underutilization by senior teams. When conference room schedules developed unexplained system errors, I implemented a transparent backup system managed by rotating committee members. Each victory was small, each compounded her mounting frustration. You can't micromanage every decision in this institute, she finally snapped during our private weekly review. I'm not, I replied calmly. I'm ensuring decisions follow merit-based protocols rather than personal preference. These researchers you're championing, they lack experience. They haven't proven themselves. How could they? You've systematically denied them the resources to do so. Her careful composure cracked slightly. I've dedicated 20 years to this institute. Everything I've built is being transformed, not destroyed, I interrupted. Your systems are being repurposed toward actual excellence rather than appearance of excellence. Later that evening, passing the main conference room, I noticed lights still burning. Inside, Gwen sat alone, surrounded by policy documents, her normally perfect posture slumped with exhaustion. For a moment, sympathy flickered. Then I remembered Quinn practicing her breakthrough presentation in a moldy room. Dr. Harlow deferring retirement because his funding was repeatedly redirected to less promising but better connected projects. Talented researchers whose careers withered while mediocrity flourished under Gwen's careful cultivation of hierarchy. The fourth week brought the first major test, the quarterly innovation showcase where potential funders toured ongoing research. Traditionally, Gwen controlled which projects were highlighted, inevitably those from her favored circle. This quarter's showcase will feature a representative selection from all research divisions. I announced at our planning meeting. We can't possibly feature everything, Gwen objected. Donors expect curated excellence. Indeed, which is why selection will be based on quantifiable metrics rather than personal assessment. The showcase lineup emerged with Quinn's project in a prime position, alongside 5 other previously sidelined researchers. Dr. Peterson's derivative work, typically given center stage, received a modest corner display. The morning of the showcase, I arrived early to find Gwen redirecting audiovisual equipment from Quinn's station to Peterson's. Technical issues, she explained smoothly. We're ensuring every presentation functions properly. How thoughtful, I replied. Fortunately, I anticipated potential equipment shortages and brought backup systems for everyone. I gestured to the technicians wheeling in new display monitors. No researcher will be disadvantaged today. The showcase proceeded flawlessly. Quinn's presentation drew significant attention, with 3 potential funders requesting follow-up meetings. Other basement researchers, similarly impressed, their innovative approaches finally receiving proper visibility. Afterward, several board members approached me privately. Remarkable talent we've apparently had hidden away, noted the board chair. Makes one wonder what else we've been missing. Gwen overheard this comment as she passed. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed a calculating intensity. That evening, a message appeared on my tablet. Dr. Lin, I believe we've begun with incompatible assumptions about institutional needs. Perhaps a private discussion might align our perspectives? Dinner tomorrow? Gwendolyn Foster. I declined politely, suggesting instead she present her concerns at the next Transparency Committee meeting. Her response came quickly. Some matters require discretion. I have information about certain researchers' histories you may find relevant to your assessment of their potential. So there it was, the inevitable attempt to undermine through whispered doubt. I forwarded her message to my secure archive without replying. The following morning, Quinn burst into my office without knocking, face flushed with anger. Dr. Peterson is claiming collaborative credit on my detection method. He's telling potential funders he provided crucial conceptual guidance when he actively blocked my research for months. I nodded calmly. I suspected something like this might emerge. Did you document your research progression? Every step, with timestamps and witness signatures. But that didn't matter before. Peterson has influence. He has connections. I corrected gently. He had those things. Quinn's hands trembled slightly. You don't understand. This always happens. They find ways to take credit, to redirect funding. The system protects them. The old system did. I agreed. This one won't. That afternoon, I called a special meeting of department heads. Dr. Peterson arrived looking confident, Gwen slightly behind him with a carefully neutral expression. I understand there's a dispute regarding intellectual contribution to the early detection methodology, I began. Peterson nodded gravely. Unfortunate situation. Young researchers sometimes misunderstand collaborative environments. I've merely clarified my guiding role in developing concepts Quinn subsequently implemented. How exactly did this guidance occur, I asked. Through scheduled meetings? Documented feedback? Joint laboratory sessions? He shifted slightly. More informal. Conversations after department meetings. Suggestions during her early presentations. Interesting, I said, opening a folder. Because Quinn has provided comprehensive documentation of her research progression, including dated laboratory notes, sequential methodology developments, and witness-signed verification of independent work. I slid the materials forward. Additionally, I have records of your 3 formal rejections of her requests for collaboration, each stating her approach lacked sufficient merit to warrant senior researcher involvement. Peterson's confident expression faltered. Those early assessments were based on incomplete understanding. As her work developed, I recognized its potential and offered guidance. After the National Health Advisory Board expressed interest, I noted, quite a coincidence in timing. Gwen intervened smoothly. Research development is rarely linear, Dr. Lin. Informal contributions often prove significant even when undocumented, which is why our new attribution policy requires contemporaneous documentation of all substantive input. I replied. A policy you yourself implemented last week, Miss Foster. The meeting concluded with Peterson's claims officially rejected and a formal note added to his file. As everyone filed out, Gwen remained behind. You've made an enemy today, she said quietly. Peterson has powerful connections outside the institute. I'm well aware, I replied, just as I'm aware of your dinner with him last night. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Monitoring my private meetings now? Not at all. But the restaurant you chose is directly across from my apartment building. Pure coincidence. For a moment, something like respect flickered in her eyes. You're more thorough than your predecessors. I came here for a specific purpose, Gwen, to transform this institute's culture completely, not partially. Every system you created to maintain your version of standards will be dismantled or repurposed. She studied me with new calculation. You know, in 3 months, the initial enthusiasm for reform will fade. The board will refocus on funding metrics and publication rates. This crusade of yours will become increasingly inconvenient. That's what you're counting on, isn't it? Weathering the storm until you can gradually restore the old hierarchies in new disguises. Her silence was confirmation enough. Here's what you haven't understood yet, I continued. I'm not like the others. I didn't accept this position as a career advancement or prestige appointment. I came specifically to address institutionalized dysfunction. I handed her a folder containing our next month's initiatives. And I've planned for the long game, not just the opening moves. The following weeks brought escalating resistance. Subtle at first, implementation delays attributed to clarification needs. Then increasingly overt as Gwen realized I wouldn't be outlasted or outmaneuvered. Anonymous complaints about disruptive restructuring appeared in board members' inboxes. Long-standing donors received concerned calls about declining standards. Senior researchers suddenly discovered scheduling conflicts for essential committee meetings. Each maneuver was met with calm, systematic countermeasures, each complaint addressed with data showing improved research outcomes and rising application rates from top scientists eager to join our transformed environment. The decisive moment arrived unexpectedly, 2 months into my directorship. The quarterly board meeting had proceeded smoothly until the final agenda item, Ethics Committee Report. Typically a formality reviewing research compliance, this particular report contained an unexpected addendum, submitted anonymously. Allegations of targeted harassment of established researchers, read the board chair, looking concerned. Claims that new leadership has created a hostile environment for senior staff through systematic favoritism toward junior researchers. All eyes turned to me. I recognized Gwen's strategy immediately. using the very language of reform against the reforms themselves. These are serious concerns, I acknowledged. Who submitted this addendum? Anonymous, replied the chair, for fear of retaliation. I see, I said, opening my tablet. Interesting timing. As I've prepared my own report for today, I projected a comprehensive analysis onto the main screen. Comparative data, showing research output, grant application success rates, and innovation metrics for the past 5 years versus our 2 months of reformed protocols. Productivity has increased 26%, I noted. Grant application success improved 31%. Most tellingly, researcher retention has reversed its 5-year decline. The board members studied the data with evident surprise. Additionally, I continued, I've compiled a more specific analysis. The next slide appeared, showing side-by-side comparisons of resource allocation patterns, before and after implementation of transparent protocols. The left column shows historical distribution of premium resources, laboratory space, equipment access, conference opportunities, and administrative support. Note the concentration among 7 specific senior researchers regardless of project merit or outcome potential. The pattern was unmistakable, a small circle of privilege amid systematic deprivation. The right column shows current distribution based on our new merit assessment protocols. The board chair leaned forward. The difference is striking. Indeed, because true excellence flourishes when opportunity aligns with innovation rather than established hierarchy. I changed to the final slide, a simple graph tracking research breakthrough announcements against researcher retention rates. For 5 years, we've been hemorrhaging talent while breakthrough innovations declined proportionally. In 2 months of reformed protocols, we've reversed both trends simultaneously. The room fell silent as the implications settled. The anonymous ethics complaint suddenly appeared transparent in its motivation. The board chair cleared his throat. This is compelling evidence of positive transformation, Dr. Lin. Thank you. Now, regarding the anonymous ethics complaint, I turned deliberately toward Gwen, who maintained perfect composure, despite the subtle tension in her shoulders. Perhaps its author would like to elaborate on specific concerns. Every eye followed mine. No one spoke. In that case, I continued, I suggest we address these concerns through complete transparency. I propose a comprehensive review of all administrative decisions over the past 5 years, including resource allocations, funding approvals, and personnel assignments. Gwen's carefully neutral expression faltered slightly. This historical review, I added, would naturally be conducted by our Transparency Committee, which Ms. Foster so capably chairs. The trap closed perfectly. Any objection would appear as resistance to the very transparency she now officially championed. Any attempt to limit the review's scope would raise immediate questions about what she sought to hide. I believe that addresses the ethics concern thoroughly, said the board chair. Unless there are specific complaints to be voiced directly? Silence again. Then we'll proceed with Dr. Lin's recommended review. Meeting adjourned. As board members filed out, offering congratulations on the impressive metrics, Gwen remained seated, her expression unreadable. When we were alone, she finally spoke. You planned this from the beginning. No, I corrected. I anticipated it. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you have 2 choices. Resign and avoid the comprehensive review that will inevitably document 20 years of systematic favoritism, or remain and lead that very review, acknowledging every inequity while implementing its corrections. That's no choice at all, she said quietly. Either way, my reputation will reflect your actual impact rather than your carefully constructed image, I finished. Just as our researchers' reputations now reflect their actual contributions rather than their political positioning. She gathered her materials with deliberate calm. You've orchestrated quite a checkmate, Dr. Lin. Not mine, Gwen. This victory belongs to every researcher whose innovation was stifled, every discovery delayed, every career derailed by artificial hierarchies. My role was merely to create space for their excellence to emerge naturally. 1 week later, the Transparency Committee convened its first historical review session. Gwen arrived precisely on time, impeccably prepared as always, to lead the systematic examination of her own legacy. The Murray Conference Room now hosted researchers of all levels daily, its premium facilities available based on project needs rather than rank. Quinn's detection method had secured major funding, with clinical trials scheduled to begin within months. The basement conference room, fully renovated, had been renamed the Innovation Lab, a deliberate symbol of our transformation. And Gwen, still administrative head, now enforced with meticulous precision the very policies that dismantled her carefully constructed kingdom. My revenge wasn't removing her power. It was redirecting that power toward healing the very wounds she had created. Not public humiliation, but public redemption. Not punishment, but reformation. 3 months after my arrival, I watched her preside over the Institute's first open research forum, where any researcher could present ideas regardless of seniority. Her voice remained steady as she introduced Quinn as keynote speaker, acknowledging her groundbreaking contributions to early detection methodology. The ultimate justice wasn't in Gwen's demotion, but in her transformation, and forced to become the public champion of values she had spent decades undermining, required to witness daily the extraordinary innovation that flourished once artificial barriers fell. Sometimes true revenge isn't about destruction, but reconstruction, particularly when the architect of the problem becomes the builder of the solution, not through choice, but through the inescapable logic of a system designed for actual excellence rather than its appearance. The greatest revenge was watching Gwen apply her considerable talents toward genuine merit rather than manufactured hierarchy, and slowly, reluctantly, recognize the superior results that emerged. If you've stayed with me through this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone who abused their power, being forced to dismantle their own system? Or maybe you've been in Quinn's position watching your valuable contributions overlooked while others took credit? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of professional justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about accountability and transformation in the workplace. Because sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't about destruction, it's about meaningful change that benefits everyone. The security guard stepped in front of me, his imposing frame blocking the boardroom entrance. "This meeting is for executives only," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. His badge glinted under the hallway lights as my research papers trembled in my hands. "There must be some mistake," I whispered, feeling dozens of eyes from inside the room shift toward the commotion. "I've been working on the Asia-Pacific market expansion for 6 months. The presentation today is based on my research." Through the gap in the doorway, I spotted him, Pierce, my direct supervisor, deliberately avoiding eye contact as he arranged presentation materials that looked eerily familiar. My materials, my graphs, my projections, my late nights and early mornings condensed into color-coded slides now bearing his name. "I have the invitation right here," I insisted, fumbling with my phone to pull up the calendar entry that had appeared mysteriously deleted. The guard's expression softened with something like pity. "Ma'am, I'm just following the updated attendance list. Your name was removed this morning." Heat crawled up my neck as I caught snippets of conversation from inside. Brilliant approach to the regulatory challenges in Singapore. Exactly the boldness we've been missing. Pierce has outdone himself this time. My stomach contracted painfully as I recognized my words, my insights, being attributed to the man who had spent the last month subtly undermining me while harvesting my ideas. The same man who had casually mentioned yesterday that I should take the day to refresh because the meeting probably wouldn't need my input after all. I gripped my portfolio tighter, knuckles turning white. 6 months of research, 3 countries visited, countless video calls at 3 a.m. to accommodate international time zones, all to have my moment of recognition stripped away with a simple deletion from an attendance list. "Is there a problem here?" A woman's voice cut through my thoughts. Mia, the head of human resources, approached with a practice-neutral expression, the kind reserved for situations requiring damage control. She was trying to enter the executive strategy meeting, the guard explained. Mia blinked twice. "Oh, I see," she said, placing a hand on my elbow and guiding me away from the doors. "Let's chat privately." In the empty conference room across the hall, Mia closed the door and turned to me. "This is awkward. There's been a reorganization of responsibilities. Pierce felt your contribution to the project has been." She paused, searching for the right corporate euphemism. "Supportive, rather than directional." "Supportive?" I echoed, disbelief cracking my voice. "I developed the entire framework. I identified the market gaps. I created the implementation timeline. Those are my slides in there." Mia's expression remained professionally sympathetic. "I understand you're upset. These situations can be challenging. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about project ownership." As she continued with hollow reassurances, the elevator doors at the end of the hallway slid open. a tall figure stepped out, surrounded by a small entourage of board members. Even from this distance, I recognized him instantly from the news articles I'd studied obsessively since the announcement. Julian Gray, the incoming CEO, arriving a week earlier than expected for his first official appearance. He paused, scanning the hallway with purpose, before his gaze landed directly on me through the glass walls of the conference room. Without hesitation, he changed course and headed straight toward us. Like this revenge story? Hit that like button, drop a comment about what you think will happen next, and subscribe to never miss another episode of Corporate Justice Served Cold. I'm Reese Palmer, 34 years old, and until this morning, I believed my decade of sacrifice for worldwide innovations was finally about to pay off. I'm the woman who skips weekend brunches to perfect financial models, the workaholic who sends emails at 2 a.m. because an idea can't wait until morning, the colleague who remembers everyone's coffee order but forgets her own doctor's appointments. I wasn't always this way. Growing up in a small lake town with parents who valued sunset boat rides over overtime, I once promised myself I'd never become one of those corporate robots. Yet here I was, practically mainlining caffeine, my apartment more storage unit than home, and my most meaningful relationship with my houseplant, which was also dying from neglect. The irony? I excelled at this life I never wanted. My analytical mind could spot market patterns others missed. My perfectionism turned chaotic data into actionable strategies. My empathy, the trait my mother always said would hold me back in business, actually became my secret weapon for understanding consumer behavior across cultures. Reese, you look surprised to see me, Julian Gray said as he entered the conference room, dismissing Mia with a subtle nod. His voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to people listening when he spoke. I straightened my posture instinctively. Mr. Gray, I wasn't expecting you until next week. I prefer to arrive unannounced. Reveals more about the organization. His eyes flickered to the portfolio I still clutched against my chest. Those wouldn't happen to be the Asia Pacific expansion materials? My heart pounded. Yes, but I'm apparently not presenting today. Interesting, because the board specifically mentioned your name when they sent me the preliminary reports. He checked his watch. The meeting started 5 minutes ago. Shall we? Before I could respond, he turned and walked toward the boardroom, clearly expecting me to follow. I shot a glance at Mia, whose carefully composed expression had cracked into genuine confusion. Outside the boardroom, the security guard's eyes widened as Julian approached. Sir, welcome to. Thank you. Julian cut him off, opening the door himself and holding it for me. The presentation had already begun. Pierce stood at the head of the table, laser pointer dancing across my charts, my words flowing from his mouth. He froze mid-sentence when Julian entered. Please don't stop on my account, Julian said pleasantly, though I am curious why Reese Palmer isn't delivering this presentation. 24 pairs of eyes swiveled first to Julian, then to me standing behind him, and finally to Pierce, whose complexion had turned an alarming shade of gray. Mr. Gray, welcome. Pierce recovered quickly. We didn't expect you today. Reese is an excellent team member who contributed research to this initiative. I'm presenting as the strategic lead. Julian nodded thoughtfully, taking an empty seat at the far end of the table, not the CEO's chair at the head. I noticed. Please continue then. Reese, join us. He gestured to an empty chair. As I slid into the seat, Pierce resumed his presentation, subtly altering his language, as my team discovered, became, as we uncovered, and my approach softened to our strategy. I watched the executives' faces, wondering if anyone else noticed the shift. I'd known Pierce was ambitious when I joined his team 2 years ago. At first, I'd admired his ability to navigate office politics while still driving results. He became a mentor of sorts, teaching me to package my ideas for executive consumption. Raw data doesn't speak for itself, Reese, he'd say. You need to tell the story. What I hadn't realized was that eventually I'd become just another character in his story, a supporting role he could write out when convenient. The betrayal hadn't happened overnight. First came the omissions from meeting invites, administrative oversight. Then the introductions where my title mysteriously downgraded from strategic director to senior analyst. Finally, the quiet reassignment of my direct reports to other teams while I traveled for research. By the time I recognized the pattern, Pierce had already positioned himself as the visionary behind the Asia-Pacific strategy. My strategy, the one I'd conceptualized after spotting regulatory changes that would create a once-in-a-decade market opportunity. As Pierce clicked to the implementation timeline slide, Julian interrupted. What about the regulatory hurdles in Singapore? Your proposal seems to gloss over them. Pierce hesitated, clearly unprepared for the question. We've accounted for standard compliance procedures. The real challenge isn't standard compliance, I found myself saying, unable to stay silent. It's navigating the new personal data protection amendments taking effect next quarter. They'll require operational restructuring that most companies aren't anticipating. Julian's gaze settled on me. And your solution? Pierce tried to interject, but Julian held up a hand, his focus unwavering from me. I took a deep breath. A two-phase approach. First, establish a regional data processing center in Malaysia, where regulations are more flexible. Second, create partnership agreements with local Singapore firms who already have compliance frameworks in place. Julian leaned forward. The cost implications? Initial investment increases by 22%, but we'd avoid the penalties and retroactive compliance costs that will hit our competitors. 3-year projection shows us ahead by 36%. The room fell silent. I could feel Pierce's glare burning into me. Julian tapped his fingers on the table. Those details aren't in this presentation. They were in the original draft, I said quietly. I streamlined for clarity. Pierce cut in. Some technical elements were too in the weeds for this audience. Julian's expression remained unreadable. I see. He turned to the rest of the room. Let's take 15 minutes. I'd like to review some materials privately. As executives filed out, whispers already spreading, Julian beckoned me forward. The complete version of your analysis. Do you have it? I handed him my portfolio. Everything's here. He nodded. Wait outside, please. In the hallway, Pierce cornered me immediately. What do you think you're doing? He hissed. My job, I replied, surprised by my steady voice. You've worked here long enough to understand how things work. Ideas need champions. I'm in a position to make your strategy happen. By erasing me from it, his expression hardened. This isn't personal. It's business. People listen to me. The board respects me. You're still building credibility. Is that why you removed me from the meeting? A thin smile crossed his face. Consider it a favor. These executives eat people like you alive. I'm protecting you while positioning your ideas where they'll actually get approved. The boardroom door opened before I could respond. Julian stood there, my portfolio under his arm. Pierce, Reese, he said calmly. Join me for a moment. Inside the boardroom, Julian had arranged 3 chairs in a triangle away from the conference table. My research was spread across the polished surface in a careful sequence I recognized, not the order I'd organized it in my portfolio, but the logical progression I'd originally designed before Pierce had reshuffled everything. Sit, Julian said, gesturing to the chairs. His tone wasn't harsh, but it left no room for negotiation. Pierce and I sat across from each other, while Julian took the 3rd chair, creating a perfect triangle of tension. Outside, executives milled in the hallway, curiosity barely disguised behind pretend conversations. Let me be clear about something, Julian began, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I accepted this position because I believed this company had untapped potential being squandered by territorial leadership. His eyes flicked between us. What I've witnessed in the past 20 minutes confirms that assessment. Pierce shifted, adjusting his tie. Sir, if I may. No, you may not. Julian cut him off. Not yet. He picked up a page from the table. This analysis of consumer behavior across generational divides in Southeast Asian markets. Whose work is this? Pierce hesitated just long enough. Mine, I said. Julian nodded, selecting another document. And this regulatory compliance framework with the color-coded implementation timeline? Also mine. The financial projections accounting for currency fluctuation risks? Those are mine as well. Julian turned to Pierce. Would you dispute any of these claims? Pierce's smile strained at the edges. Reese is an exceptional researcher. Her attention to detail is why I selected her for my team. But assembling research into actionable strategy is where senior leadership adds value. Interesting perspective, Julian replied. Because when I received the preliminary reports last week, the board attributed this entire strategic approach to Reese Palmer. They specifically mentioned her innovative regulatory compliance framework as the cornerstone of the proposal. The blood drained from Pierce's face. That's why I was confused when I arrived today and found her barred from the meeting, Julian continued. Even more confused when I saw someone else presenting her work. Pierce leaned forward. There appears to be a misunderstanding. As department head, I naturally guide and shape the work of my team. Let's test that theory, Julian interrupted, turning to me. Reese, Explain the cultural sensitivity matrix you've developed for market entry sequencing. For the next 10 minutes, I walked through my methodology, the patterns I'd identified, and how they translated to implementation priorities. Julian asked pointed questions that probed the depths of my understanding, questions that revealed he'd already thoroughly studied my work. When I finished, he turned to Pierce. Now your perspective on the same topic. Pierce stumbled through a response that mixed corporate jargon with vague principles of international business. His answers grew increasingly defensive, as Julian's questions became more specific. Enough, Julian finally said. Pierce, please step outside while I speak with Reese privately. After Pierce left, Julian's professional demeanor softened slightly. How long has this been happening? I measured my words carefully. The credit redistribution? It's been gradual over the past 4 months, but the complete sidelining only happened in the last 3 weeks. And you didn't report it? To whom? Pierce is well connected throughout the organization. He plays golf with the chief operating officer every Sunday. Julian nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. Tell me something, Reese. If you were in my position right now, what would you do? The question caught me off guard. About Pierce? About this situation? About this company's leadership culture? About you? I took a deep breath, recognizing this moment for what it was, not just about Pierce's betrayal, but a test of my own leadership instincts. I wouldn't make an impulsive decision based on one incident, regardless of how revealing it might be. I'd look for patterns, for the system that allowed this situation to develop. Julian tilted his head considering my words, and if the pattern suggests a systemic issue, then I'd address the system, not just the symptom. Punishing Pierce might feel satisfying, but if the culture rewards his behavior, someone else will simply take his place. A smile, the first genuine one I'd seen, briefly crossed Julian's face. Continue your presentation to the executive team, the complete version, with nothing streamlined for clarity. 20 minutes later, I stood before the reassembled executive team, Pierce now seated in the audience, his expression unreadable. Julian had taken the CEO's seat at the head of the table, my complete research organized neatly before him. As I presented the Asia-Pacific strategy in its full complexity, I watched realization dawn across various faces. Several executives began taking furious notes. Others exchanged meaningful glances. My confidence grew with each slide, each question answered, each nuance explained. When I finished, Julian stood. Thank you, Reese. That was illuminating. He addressed the room. I'd like the executive team to stay for further discussion. Pierce, please return to your department. Reese, a word outside. In the hallway, Julian's expression was thoughtful. That presentation confirmed what I suspected when I first reviewed your work. You have remarkable insight. Thank you, sir. The question now is what happens next. He checked his watch. I have meetings for the remainder of the day. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., my office. We'll discuss your future with the company. As he walked away, Pierce emerged from the boardroom, his face flushed with barely contained anger. He brushed past without acknowledging me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulatory messages from colleagues who had witnessed my unexpected moment in the spotlight, mixed with worried glances from Pierce's allies. By evening, the office hummed with speculation about what Julian's early arrival might mean for the company's power structure. I stayed late, partly to avoid the awkwardness of elevator small talk, partly to process the whirlwind day. As I gathered my things, a message appeared on my screen from an unknown internal number. This isn't over. Some battles you win, some you survive. Choose wisely. Sleep evaded me that night. I rehearsed different scenarios for my morning meeting with Julian, ranging from a dream promotion to a courteous dismissal for creating organizational discord. Corporate politics followed no predictable rules, and new CEOs often had loyalties and agendas invisible to everyone else. At 6:45 a.m., I stood outside Julian's office, coffee in hand, heart racing. His assistant hadn't arrived yet, but the light inside was already on. I knocked softly. "Come in," Julian called. He sat reviewing documents, already impeccably dressed. No sign of the early hour affecting his alertness. Punctuality, good. He gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been reviewing your personnel file." My stomach tightened. Personnel files contained performance reviews, all written by Pierce over the past 2 years. "Interesting reading," Julian continued. "According to your most recent evaluation, you struggle with big-picture thinking and need guidance on strategic applications of research. So, this was how it would end. Pierce's groundwork would discredit me despite yesterday's triumph. Those assessments don't reflect my capabilities, I said quietly. Obviously, Julian agreed. They reflect a systematic effort to undermine your advancement. He closed the file. Which brings me to why I asked you here. I need to understand what you want, Reese. I'm not sure I understand the question. It's simple. After what happened yesterday, I could fire Pierce. Would that satisfy you? The directness of his question startled me. No, I answered honestly. Why not? He stole your work. He deliberately sabotaged your career. Because firing Pierce doesn't fix the problem. The company culture allowed, even rewarded his behavior. Another Pierce would emerge within months. Julian smiled. Exactly what I thought you'd say. He pushed a document across the desk. This is why I'm creating a new position reporting directly to me, Strategic Innovation Director. The role would give you oversight of cross-departmental initiatives, including the Asia-Pacific expansion. I stared at the job description, excitement building. This would essentially make me Pierce's superior, yes, along with several other department heads. The opportunity was everything I'd worked for: recognition, advancement, the chance to implement my ideas without filtration through others. Yet something felt wrong. What's troubling you? Julian asked, reading my hesitation. Why not bring in someone you know? Someone you trust from your previous company? Julian leaned back. Because transforming company culture requires both outsider perspective and insider knowledge. I'm the outsider. I need a talented insider who recognizes the problems and hasn't been corrupted by them. He tapped the document. I'm offering you the position based on your work and your instincts. Your answer to my question yesterday told me everything I needed to know about your leadership potential. As I reached for the document, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. We'll have to continue this later. There's an urgent situation with the board. Is something wrong? Potentially. It seems there's been some resistance to my personnel decisions. Pierce has apparently been busy overnight. My moment of triumph evaporated. Of course, Pierce wouldn't surrender without a fight. He had years of connections, favors owed, dirt collected. Should I be worried? I asked. Julian stood, gathering his materials. Meet me in the main conference room in 30 minutes. And Reese, bring your complete Asia-Pacific files, everything you have. As I returned to my desk, a notification popped up on my computer. An emergency all-hands meeting scheduled for 9 a.m., called by the board chairman, not Julian. Moments later, Pierce walked past my desk with two board members, deep in conversation. He spotted me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the satisfied look of someone who had laid a trap and watched their prey walk right into it. My phone pinged with a message from Julian. Change of plans. Board meeting now. Bring files immediately. As I gathered my materials, another employee stopped by my desk. Have you heard? The board might be reversing Julian's appointment. Something about procedural violations in his hiring. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Had I aligned myself with the wrong side? Had Pierce somehow orchestrated Julian's removal before my promotion could be formalized? With my files clutched against my chest, just like yesterday, but with entirely different stakes, I walked toward the boardroom, uncertainty clouding what had briefly seemed like a clear path to justice. The boardroom buzzed with tension when I arrived. Board members clustered in whispered conversations that abruptly ceased as I entered. Julian stood alone near the window, his posture relaxed despite the obvious hostility directed toward him. The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Garrett, occupied the head seat that Julian had claimed yesterday. Pierce sat 3 chairs from Garrett, looking simultaneously nervous and triumphant. When he caught my eye, he gave a small shrug as if to say, "You should have chosen differently." "Miss Palmer, thank you for joining us," Garrett said, his tone coolly professional. "Please, take a seat." I slid into an empty chair near the door, the furthest possible position from both Julian and Pierce. The symbolic distance wasn't lost on anyone. "Now that we're all present," Garrett continued, "let's address the concerning developments of the past 24 hours. It appears our new CEO has taken unusual interest in restructuring department leadership without proper consultation with this board." Julian didn't defend himself immediately, which surprised me. Instead, he watched the room with the calculated patience of someone waiting for opponents to reveal their strategy. "Additionally," Garrett added, "we've received troubling information about yesterday's incident. While innovation and fresh perspectives are valued, undermining established leadership structures creates organizational chaos." Pierce straightened in his chair. "If I may, sir, as the department head in question, I believe context would be helpful for everyone." Garrett nodded. "Please proceed." Pierce adopted an expression of reluctant duty. I've mentored Reese for 2 years, nurturing her analytical talents while working to develop her understanding of strategic application. Yesterday's situation represented an unfortunate misunderstanding about project ownership. My fingers tightened around my portfolio. This reframing, casting himself as the supportive mentor and me as the misguided protege, was masterful manipulation. The Asia-Pacific strategy, Pierce continued, evolved through collaborative effort, with my team contributing various components under my direction. While Reese certainly provided valuable research elements, presenting her as the strategy's architect mischaracterizes the development process and undermines team hierarchy. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Pierce had clearly spent the night cultivating his narrative and supporters. Furthermore, he added, turning his gaze to Julian, Mr. Gray's interference created unnecessary tension within a high-functioning team. His suggestion of creating a new director position that circumvents established reporting structures seems hasty at best. Julian finally spoke. Is that assessment unanimous among your team members, Pierce? Pierce hesitated slightly. My leadership approach has consistently delivered results this board has praised. My team understands the necessity of clear direction. That wasn't my question, Julian replied mildly. Team dynamics naturally include different perspectives, Pierce deflected. Indeed they do, Julian agreed, pushing away from the window. Which is why I spent last night speaking with members of your team. The subtle shift in atmosphere was almost imperceptible, but I felt it, like the barometric pressure drop before a storm. Julian approached the table. Interesting conversations, particularly with Alice from market research, Thomas from financial modeling, and Wei from regulatory compliance. All described remarkably similar experiences working under your leadership. Pierce's confident smile faltered. But we're not here to conduct a performance review, Julian continued. We're here because the board has concerns about my leadership decisions. Fair enough. Let's examine the evidence. He turned to me. Reese, the files, please. I handed him my portfolio, confused about his strategy but trusting it more than Pierce's obvious manipulations. Julian spread selected documents across the table. These are the original Asia-Pacific strategy components, with creation metadata and editing histories intact. Not the versions presented yesterday, but the source files. The board members leaned forward with newfound interest. You'll notice each document's properties, Julian continued. Creation dates, author information, revision histories, digital breadcrumbs that tell an interesting story. Pierce's complexion paled slightly. For instance, this market segmentation analysis. Julian selected a particular document, created by Reese Palmer 3 months ago, modified extensively last week by Pierce Harmon, with all author attributes changed to remove the original creator. Murmurs rippled through the room. Similar patterns appear across all core strategy documents, Julian added. Systematic removal of contribution credits, retroactive editing of creation dates, meticulously altered properties to obscure origins. Garrett cleared his throat. While concerning, document ownership disputes are hardly board-level matters. I agree completely, Julian replied smoothly, which is why I'm more interested in these. He produced another set of papers from his briefcase. Email exchanges between Pierce and representatives from CompetEdge Industries over the past 2 months. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. CompetEdge was our largest competitor. Pierce stood abruptly. Those are confidential communications taken out of context. Context is precisely what concerns me, Julian countered. Particularly the context of sharing proprietary strategy components, Reese's work, specifically, with a direct competitor while simultaneously burying her contributions internally. The board members exchanged alarmed glances. That's preposterous, Pierce sputtered. I would never. March 15th email. Julian cut him off. Attached preliminary findings on regulatory hurdles in Singapore market. Advance intel on approach allows positioning ahead of announcement. Sent from your personal email to CompetEdge's Vice President of Global Expansion. Garrett's expression hardened. Is this accurate, Pierce? It's a mischaracterization, Pierce insisted, though his voice had lost its conviction. Networking with industry colleagues is standard practice. Sharing confidential strategy with competitors is not, Julian replied, nor is suppressing innovative work to maintain personal position while simultaneously profiting from that same work externally. The revelation hit me like physical impact. Pierce hadn't just stolen my work for internal advancement, he'd been selling my insights to competitors. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. These are serious allegations, Garrett said, his previous alliance with Pierce visibly wavering. With substantial evidence, Julian added. Which brings me to why Miss Palmer's presence was necessary today. Not as an accused party, but as the primary victim of intellectual theft and corporate espionage. The focus of the room shifted to me. I felt dizzy with the sudden reversal. Anger, mixing with vindication. Julian continued. The Asia-Pacific strategy remains viable, with Reese's original components restored and Pierce's compromised modifications removed. Implementation should proceed under new leadership, unquestionably Reese's, given her demonstrated expertise and proven loyalty to this company's interests. Garrett studied me with newfound consideration. Miss Palmer, were you aware of any of this? The credit theft, yes, I answered honestly. The external sharing, no. I would have reported that immediately, regardless of potential personal consequences. Pierce made one final desperate attempt. This is clearly orchestrated character assassination. I've served this company faithfully for 8 years. My record speaks for itself. It certainly does, Julian agreed, which is why I've also prepared a comprehensive audit of your previous innovative strategies for board review. Patterns emerge across years, not just months. The next hour unfolded with surgical precision as Julian methodically dismantled Pierce's professional facade. Board members transitioned from skepticism to shock to resolve. Pierce's allies distanced themselves with each new revelation. By meeting's end, Pierce sat alone, reputation in tatters, career imploding in real time. As the board called for a private deliberation, we were asked to step outside. In the hallway, Pierce grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. You planned this, he hissed. You manipulated Julian, fed him information. I removed his hand calmly. No, Pierce. You did this to yourself. I simply did my job exceptionally well. So well that your theft became obvious to anyone who looked closely enough. This isn't over, he threatened, voice barely above a whisper. Actually, it is, Julian interrupted, approaching from behind. Security is waiting to escort you from the building. Company devices and access have been deactivated. Legal will contact you regarding confidentiality violations and potential litigation. As security led Pierce away, I felt strangely hollow. The victory tasted different than I'd imagined. Less sweet satisfaction, more somber resolution. Julian watched them disappear around the corner. Disappointing. I expected more dignity in defeat. You knew about the CompEdge connection before yesterday, I realized suddenly. He nodded. Board due diligence revealed irregularities in information security. Your situation provided the perfect lens to examine the broader problem. He studied my expression. You're not celebrating. I never wanted his destruction, I admitted. Just recognition for my work. You'll have that and more, Julian assured me. Though it might interest you to know that Pierce's downfall wasn't my doing or yours. It was his assistant's. His assistant? I echoed, confused. Amelia. After years of watching him steal others' work, she began documenting everything. When news of my appointment circulated, she approached me confidentially. Your situation merely confirmed what she'd already compiled. The quiet dignity of that revelation, someone who had witnessed injustice and methodically prepared for the moment when truth could prevail, struck me deeply. The Strategic Innovation Director position is still yours if you want it, Julian said. Though, after today's revelations, the board might approve something more substantial. 2 weeks later, I stood before the executive team again, this time as the newly appointed Executive Vice President of Global Strategy. The restructured organization chart displayed on the screen showed my position with clear lines of authority over departments that once viewed my contributions as mere support function. As I presented the revised Asia-Pacific strategy, now expanding to include additional markets identified through my research methodology, I noticed several former allies of Pierce paying particularly close attention. Not from fear or obligation, but with genuine engagement and respect. At the meeting's conclusion, I stopped by Amelia's desk. She'd been promoted to strategy coordinator, reporting directly to me. The Singapore projections look excellent, I told her. Your analysis of cultural adoption factors added significant depth. Her surprise at receiving direct credit made my heart ache with recognition. Thank you for noticing, she said simply. I always will, I promised. Proper attribution matters on my team. That evening, as I packed up my belongings from my old desk for the move to my new office, corner view, executive furnishings, name on the door, I found a handwritten note from Julian. True revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so extraordinary that those who dismissed you must acknowledge your excellence every day. You've achieved that not by tearing Pierce down, but by rising so high that his absence becomes irrelevant to your story. Well done. Wool, wool, wool. I tucked the note into my jacket pocket, reflecting on how differently things might have unfolded. In my darkest moments after Pierce's betrayal, I'd fantasized about exposing him, humiliating him, watching his career burn. But this, creating a team where ideas flourished regardless of title, where contribution earned recognition on merit alone, this was better. The true revenge wasn't Pierce's downfall. It was transforming the system that once enabled him into one where talent like mine, and Amelia's, and countless others, could no longer be silenced or stolen. If this story of corporate justice resonated with you, hit that subscribe button for more tales of determination and redemption. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences with workplace betrayal. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And don't forget to like this video to help others find this story who might need to hear that patience, documentation, and excellence are sometimes the sweetest revenge of all.